Welcome. My name is Mohammed Abdullah, and I'm the head of the Inclusive Leadership course. Throughout this video, I am going to talk you through what the course is, who it's for, the structure of the Inclusive Leadership course, what is in the 2023 Inclusive Leadership course, and also next steps, what's expected from you as senior leaders, but also what is expected from us as course providers. Before I get started, just a little about myself. I've worked in education for almost 2 decades now. I initially started in alternative provision with a desire to make a difference for children who experience vulnerability and disadvantage. I then moved into mainstream with a sole focus to reduce exclusions as much as I could. And I worked in an all-through school in South London as an inclusion and safeguarding senior lead. This resulted in me coordinating the resources and whole school support for students and a whole school approach to inclusion and safeguarding. And the impact of that was that 42.4% of our students receiving input from inclusion achieved 9 to 5 in GCSE English and Maths, which was at the time in comparison to the national average of 13.5% in 2019. We also had one permanent exclusion over a 10-year period from 2010 to 2020, and a reduction of suspensions from 510 annually to 11 in the last year that I was in that school. But mostly what we did was change the culture of the school, moving away from a deficit-based approach to one that saw students and their families, as well as the local community, as assets. And hopefully myself and my colleagues who have similar journeys in their senior leadership journey are able to share that with you and be able to help you share that with one another as well, while we really dig into the learning of the course. And I want to say thank you for joining this course. We're excited to meet you in the sessions and to get to know you as well over the period of the year. So I hope this short video answers many questions that you might have about the course, but feel free to email us and ask questions throughout the course when they arise. So who are we? Well, the difference grew from an IPPR report that was published in 2017 called Making the Difference, which investigated the disproportionate impact of exclusion on children who experience vulnerability and disadvantage disproportionately in comparison to their peers. And in 2018, we founded The Difference to improve outcomes for those children by raising the status and the expertise of those who teach them and those who lead them. And this has been done through 2 different courses and programs, the Difference Leaders program and the Inclusive Leadership course, which you are taking part in. And before we move on to the kind of clear principles and goals of the course, I think it's essential to explain that our Inclusive Leadership course acknowledges the reality of fundamental challenges which face schools and school leaders. And we might view these challenges across 3 broad areas. The first, which is kind of maintaining high expectations for student progress and achievement, measures that are very keenly valued by the DfE, Ofsted, parents, and perhaps students too. Supporting the diverse and complex needs of all students, because especially those who are experiencing vulnerability and disadvantage, we know they're disproportionately excluded, so therefore likely to face significant lifelong challenges. And thirdly, developing skills and understanding of all staff to meet these key challenges. These are challenges which are often in tension with each other. And these are tensions or conflicts that can leave the most vulnerable students caught in the middle. So throughout the ILC, we want to support leaders to step confidently towards these challenges and being aware of those tensions, developing practice and systems directly relevant to their own schools, which can resolve them, and also working in collaboration with senior leaders, staff, and students. And this course is underpinned by 3 core principles which run through every session and shape the implementation and impacts leaders have in their schools. 1, all children have learning, well-being, and safeguarding needs. Our framework for inclusion is built up from a universal foundation, which recognizes the needs of every student, does not see inclusion as a peripheral support for a minority of students. Instead, it challenges this problematic notion that normal somehow equals no needs. Our second principle is that relationships are integral to learning. We cannot learn unless we feel safe. Dysregulated behaviors are rooted in unsafe experiences. And by developing the relational practice of all staff, we can initiate, grow, and repair relationships, and improve feelings of safety in students and staff. And we're going to introduce leaders to 7 relational practices across the year. First and foremost, because until those practices become personally meaningful to you, it is not possible to make them meaningful to your staff or your school context. And lastly, leading practice and system development is key to whole school inclusion. Through our practice and systems framework, we are going to support leaders to distinguish clearly between practice and systems in your schools, enabling them to connect key inclusion outcomes with the practice and systems which drive them, and to articulate clearly the practice that you expect of staff, and to develop systems in your schools which actively promote this in practice. In particular, we are supporting you to create practice journeys for your staff in your schools. Most crucially, there is a question of who is this course for? Well, most crucially, it's not what level, but the degree of reach and support with other senior leaders and your colleagues in your school. A whole school leadership role which improves outcomes and develops staff practice, and ready to share and engage with other school leaders. And the course is inclusive, obviously, non-judgmental about school type, and that engagement makes it a rich and exciting place to be. So the structure of the course has been designed to follow a learning cycle across each half term between the 6 course sessions. And this structure supports 5 important outputs. The first is to learn. Be introduced to key practices that foster and strengthen relationships across the whole community. Exploring how school systems interact with one another and how these key practices can directly link to improved outcomes for your students. For example, the inclusion framework helps you to recognize all the different parts of the school that interact with one another. Collaborating on assignments. There are going to be 5 assignments across the course, assignments that are designed to be practical and accessible for you and your senior leaders with significant leadership commitments. And all assignments are tools to help reflect on learning. But they also support the professional development of your staff and understanding of your school. Again, an example of this is that leaders complete a personal reflection journal following the trauma-informed practice session. This supports them to understand their own practice, but has been used very successfully as a whole staff CPD tool as well. Implement and evaluate. The introduction to new frameworks will support you to map and evaluate the existing systems and practices in your school. Senior leaders on the course have found that the frameworks are incredibly valuable in identifying gaps and priorities to improve the outcomes of the school community. And again, the practice and systems framework can help you to evaluate your own systems and your own practices in your school. Network and share. This year, we have a community of roughly 150 senior leaders from across the country. And including our alumni cohorts, this is over 300 senior leaders who you can share your challenges, successes, and impacts with. Exposure to understanding practice from other schools in your cohort and previous cohorts will help you feel connected to a community that you can learn from. An example of this are that schools interacting with one another about behaviour policies, helping to co-design and shape policies in their schools and learning from one another to do this. And lastly, to have meaningful impact in your schools, we want you to focus on a data outcome you want to improve in your school and use your learning from the course to improve those outcomes. You will regularly monitor, measure, and respond to the data, improving outcomes for students in your school. We will also be offering a certificate of completion. And to successfully complete this course, there are some course requirements to achieve your course certificate at the end of the year. You're going to be assigned 5 assignments across the year, and you will need to complete a minimum of 3 assignments throughout the year. We are also keen for you to get as much out of the course as possible, which requires attendance to as many sessions as possible. And we understand that schools are unpredictable places and that there are times where you may need to remain in school on the day of the course. If you let us know in advance, we can offer you a place at our London, our Manchester, our Newcastle, our Nottingham or Exeter cohort sessions, so you're still able to make it. From our second session, we will be asking you to reflect on your learning from the previous session, what you have done with your learning, and if you've seen any changes or impact. And we're going to do this at the start of every session. You'll be asked to share with your colleagues. We will share with your head teacher or your multi-academy trust or your local authority if they've been in charge of facilitating this course. And this is to support you to improve the outcomes you have identified in your school. And at the end of this leads to a certificate for completion of the Inclusive Leadership course. So what's in the Inclusive Leadership course? And what are the relational practices and outcomes that they support? Well, in the first session, we're going to explore the inclusion framework and the practice and systems framework, exploring how inclusion can be mapped to support students across the whole school and what practice and systems exist to support the delivery of this. Session 2, we will want to explore and understand what trauma is, how it affects the development of children, how we can use this understanding to support all children facing vulnerability and challenge. In our third session, we're going to explore bias-informed and asset-based practice to understand the inequality of outcomes, identify what bias looks like, and how we can work with staff to respond to prejudice or discrimination in our schools. But also think about how we can respond to those challenges using an asset-based approach, moving away from a deficit-based approach to an approach that recognizes the qualities, the knowledge, and skills of everyone within our community. Our fourth session will explore contextual safeguarding and responding to harmful and abusive behaviours, supporting all staff to increase the speed of recognition and referral, but also understanding what harmful and abusive behaviours look like and how we can respond to these behaviours. In our penultimate session, we will be thinking about compassionate minds approach as well as restorative practice, how we can reduce repeat harmful behaviours and repeat suspensions, and how to develop a school culture that supports the improvement in well-being, not only for students and families, but also for staff in your school too. And in our last session, we will use our learning from across the year to think about how they connect with one another and how and what they mean for our schools. We are also going to explore internal alternative provision and what an authentically whole school approach to an internal alternative provision looks like and can look like for your school. Well, how do we improve the impact whilst being on the Inclusive Leadership course? Well, throughout the Inclusive Leadership course, I've been incredibly fortunate over the last 4 years to work directly with hundreds of very committed senior leaders and head teachers, offer some reflections, and receive some reflections on what has delivered the most impact from the course in schools and across multi-academy trusts. Leaders that are ready to drive relevant change make an impact. This isn't a passive course where you absorb learning and then just transfer it into your school. Instead, it's one that allows you to be creative, to understand what the learning does for the context of your school. And you have an incredibly diverse and rich community to actively engage with, to learn what others are doing in their schools for their context. So it's an amazing opportunity to lead change, which is directly relevant to your school and looks unique to your own school context. Head teachers who actively engage with their senior leader drive impact. So finding time and space to understand each session and also consider next step plans as well, whilst also providing an opportunity to share learning with the whole senior leadership team, including the engagement with assignments. Connecting course content to key school priorities and also the colleagues who lead them. Leaders who build on the relationships they already have to test and cascade learning from the course, making it relevant to the school priorities that exist in their school. And lastly, preempting and embracing the challenge. Becoming more inclusive is a fundamentally challenging and inevitably uncomfortable journey. And this is true for leaders on the course, but also for the whole school community, including staff. Being ready for this and not resistant to it maximizes the opportunities offered across the year. And I am in no doubt that taking this into consideration, that you will have a successful and impactful time across the year by engaging with leaders on the course and those within your own school in implementing the learning and monitoring the impact. So look out for notifications and look out for correspondence from us up until the first session. You will all have been added to our Google Classroom. If you haven't yet, it means that your Google Classroom hasn't accepted your email, and there are a variety of reasons for this. I would recommend and I suggest setting up a personal Gmail account to have access to the resources that you'll be using in the sessions, as well as assignments that you'll be allocated to have access. We will continue to use your school email as the email for correspondence. And the majority of senior leaders on the course throughout the past few years have reported that they found the opportunities to network with other senior leaders in the Inclusive Leadership course incredibly valuable. So you are part of 5 cohorts of senior leaders who you are able to engage with and learn from one another. For example, leaders in the past have collaborated on behavior policies, internal AP, reintegration policies, and trauma-informed practice. And so you will all be added to our Inclusive Leadership community, a community forum of the 5 different cohorts this year, as well as our alumni cohorts and leaders from previous years as well. And that cross-cohort learning and cross-year learning is incredibly valuable, especially when engaging with those who have had the time over the past few years to implement their learning and begin to really see the impact of it. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, and so is my colleague Sean. And in getting ready for the course, we will ensure that the venue details and any information that you need for the 6 session dates have been sent to you. and we will send all required pre-reading for the sessions when they come. What you will do to be ready for the session is ensure that those dates are booked out for each of the 6 sessions. Identify with your head teacher the key school priorities you hope to address through the Inclusive Leadership course, and read the recommended pre-reading for sessions so that you feel like you are kind of up to date and have some kind of foundational knowledge before you come in to your session. Thank you for watching our video. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email me. Until then, I hope the start of your term goes smoothly, and I look forward to seeing you at our first Inclusive Leadership course session.